Welcome to the Spawn Chunks, episode number 290 for Monday, March 25th, 2024. This is a podcast all about Minecraft, available across all of the major podcasting platforms, including YouTube. If you're enjoying the show, consider subscribing wherever you're listening to this. It's free and it helps us out a lot. My name is Joel Duggan, and joining me, as always, is my friend Jonny, also known as Pixel Riffs across the interwebs. Hello, sir.
Hello, and we are not alone. This time we are joined by Mogswamp, a YouTube content creator and streamer who specializes in Superflat survival gameplay. He's also part of the Minecraft SOS server, along with me and a cast of other creators, and he is known throughout the interwebs as the Wandering Trader's best friend. We've already been talking to Mog in our pre-show, recorded exclusively for patrons. You can visit patreon.com/thespawnchunks to support the show and get access to the render distance, the extended version of the podcast, where we've been talking to Mog about his design background and how that bleeds into modding Minecraft and filming Minecraft. You can find Mog at youtube.com/Mogswamp, where he just passed 2 million subscribers, and you can also catch his streams live on YouTube or at twitch.tv/Mogswamp. Mog, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm super excited.
This is where we do our quick login, and traditionally our guests go first. So Mogswamp, what have you been up to in Minecraft this week?
Oh man, it has been crazy the past month or so because I've been on the SOS SMP with Pix here, and it's really my first time going back to SMP content in like 10 plus years. I used to do it back in the day, but for a long time now, I've just kind of been doing my own thing in single player on my Superflat world. So just learning the workflow for SMP content and remembering how to be social on camera has been a crazy challenge for me, but it's been really fun, especially because I haven't even played a non-Superflat world at all since probably like 1.15. So there's just so much to the game that I've never experienced because you can't do it in Superflat. So I've been having a lot of fun just catching up on things that everybody else has been playing with for years at this point.
And caving. We went caving on day one together, and I was absolutely fascinated to go caving with you because you hadn't seen, I mean, you'd probably caught screenshots or, checked out other people's videos, maybe dipped in here and there to take a look at 118 terrain, but just your joy at how large the underground caverns were in like deep slate levels on down it kind of recaptures that feeling for me of playing Minecraft for the first time. And I can imagine it's sort of like that if you've mained Superflat for so long, you know so much about the game's mechanics and everything, but just seeing terrain reach the heights and depths that it has now is a really cool experience.
Yeah, that was a real treat because I've like you said, I've seen it in other people's videos, but it just doesn't do it justice. Like when you yourself step into that giant dripstone cavern for the first time, it's like, oh my lord, this is so much bigger than they used to be. I've been having a lot of fun with that. Other than that, though, I have these 100 days challenges that I do. If you guys didn't know, there are actually 9 different Superflat presets. The classic Superflat with just the 3 layers of dirt is just one of them. So I've been trying to conquer them all in hardcore, and I've just finished up 100 days on the Tunneler's Dream preset. Hopefully that video will be coming out soon. And then, still just chipping away at my flat world. Got a giant project to dig 50 million dirt because of this short I made a year ago. Some of you might have seen it, but I basically challenged the internet and lost. So those are like my 3 main things. I got my Superflat world, I've got SOS, and I've got my little challenge videos that I'm doing. And just juggling all that has been a lot, but it's fun.
How far along are you in the 50 million dirt that you need to gather?
I'm like just past the 1 million mark, which doesn't sound great because it's been a year, but I haven't really been like full grinding it. I think like it's coming. Like I think once SOS ends and I'm like feeling bored, I'm just gonna take a month and just stream every day, digging dirt all day long and see how far I can get.
Yeah, well, I thought I had it bad digging out the area I'm digging on Minecraft SOS, which I think my chat has calculated is going to be about 2 million blocks, and I think I'm over 250,000 just in stone, and that doesn't count like deep slate, the moss that I'm using to insta-mine through deep slate layers. I should check in on the latest numbers because I have dug out a couple more this week, but you've been helping me with that as well, actually, because you've been logging in and helping Jimmy dig out the chunk that he was digging, and then you and I went to raid an ancient city, which was one of the things we discovered was underneath the circle when Jimmy was helping me out. So that's been
that was something else. That was my first real ancient city raid. I've done it like once or twice in like one-off videos with people, but never like trying to actually complete it. Like the times I've done in the past, we were just running around willy-nilly, letting the warden spawn, just being silly, you know? But this was like, we were actually trying to get in there and raid it in hardcore.
Yes.
And my heart was pounding.
Yeah.
It's actually, they've nailed the atmosphere.
It's a very different experience where you care whether or not you die. And, you're not just doing it for the memes. You're like full on like stealthing it as we were doing.
Right.
So yeah, my footage of that is going to come out this week, and I can't wait to share it with people because it was super fun. But so far on Minecraft SOS, I've uncovered a geode, a bunch of flooded caves, and an ancient city underneath this giant circle that I'm digging out, and it's been super fun, especially now that we've all been to the end. So I now have Elytra and shulker boxes on this project, and it really feels like a sense of peace has returned slightly. I don't have to feel quite so tense about dropping down into a chunk that goes all the way to bedrock anymore. And that's been a lot of progress that's been just smoothed out slightly by having access to what I feel like is modern Minecraft conveniences again.
Oh yeah. And think about what you just said, how far the game is. Like, go and say that to you pre 1.18. Oh, I've just dug a hole and I found a flooded cave, a geode, and an ancient city. You'd be like, what?
Yeah.
What are any of those things? I feel like it's easy to take for granted how much the game has changed in the past couple of years, but like all those things are brand new, right?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Like 119, like I guess the geodes are as far back as 117. But yeah, even then, like there's...
Still feels new to me.
Of course. But yeah, the other thing I've been doing on Minecraft SOS, our latest Fate Coin challenge was to build something at spawn. And I decided to do something slightly different because my build isn't actually at spawn in the overworld, it's at spawn in the nether. I decided to work on a nether hub for us because I was tired of traipsing through a soul sand valley in order to get from my base to the spawn portal and to other places. So I decided to completely overhaul the nether side of spawn and create a little round hub that we could branch off from with different tunnels and whatnot. And I've smelted so much copper in the process of digging out huge areas of overworld terrain that I decided to actually put some of that to use. And I'll provide a couple of screenshots for the show notes, but it started off as just like a pizza made out of moss and dark oak slabs and basically a bunch of stuff that I thought, well, this can be spawn-proof and we're not going to have skeletons spawning in here with us. And then I built the walls up using copper and moss and tried to make it look like a modern eco-wall kind of vibe. And I'm really happy with it. It turned out very well, and I need to get a few people to sign off on it so that I'm eligible to get another fake coin. But I think it's in their best interests because that's what we're using to revive people on the server.
I'm happy to say that I was the first to sign.
Yeah, that's what we like to hear.
I was giddy when you said that you had built a nether hub because I'm just so sick of running across that soul sand to get everywhere.
Yeah. And
we really needed it. And it looks beautiful, man. I absolutely love how it came out.
Thank you. Yeah. I was also sick of people putting down slabs over soul sand and not realizing that the physics of soul sand still apply if you have slabs put over the top of them, right? So like you're still, technically speaking, getting slowed down by all of that. And right. I don't know how many people have soul speed, but I imagine it's not everyone. And so I tried to keep a little bit of the soul soil underneath the slabs in the hub, but I removed all of the soul sand from the area because I don't want to be like wading through treacle to get to where I want to go.
Thank goodness.
I did that on the desert road to a couple of different places in our nether tunnel system. I decorated the pillars that hold up the road with inset soul sand. And I just wasn't thinking. I just brought it all the way up to the top. And all the roads are slabs because you don't want anything spawning on them. And I'm running down the road and then all of a sudden everything just stops. And you go to a crawl. It's like, am I hungry? Is my keyboard not working? Like I couldn't figure it out for the longest time. And then I was like, oh, it's because there's soul sand underneath the slabs.
Mm-hmm. Yep. That'll get you. That'll get you.
Oh man, it was so funny. Like I was basically pranking myself because of just and in my defense, they were built before like that happened, before that would happen in underneath soul sand and soul soil. Like I think those were like 112, 113, I think, unless that's always been in the game and I just misremembering.
Yeah, I mean, Soul Soil was also not added until 116, and you wouldn't get as big patches of soul sand in the nether to begin with, so it was something that you could usually build around or avoid. But then, the nether landscape completely changed 116 onwards.
I gotta say, for you guys on SOS, and specifically your hub picks, that has to be really freeing to be playing on what is essentially a temporary server. Like it's not going to be a long-term world. Eventually, hopefully not soon, but somebody, is going to end up dying and not being able to come back. And to go and have to do something like another hub, you're like, well, I'm not going to build the biggest, baddest, grandest nether hub ever, because like, who knows, maybe I don't even get a quarter of the way through it. Yeah. And you've already got a big project. So you can just kind of shoot from the hip and say, I know what I'm doing. I'm going to do another hub. It's going to be 21 blocks across and it's just going to work. And I'm going to make it look nice. And there's something really freeing, I would imagine, about that sort of, not, I don't say inconsequential, but the temporary nature of the server, just to say like, well, I don't have to really worry too much about this. I can just do something fun and then move on to the next thing.
Yeah, my ambitions were never going to be grandiose with it, and I figured I would match sort of the scale that people were building stuff on the Spawn in the overworld side for like little shops and boutiques and art installations and stuff that everyone has built up around Spawn right now. So I didn't want to bite off more than I could chew, especially considering that that's what I'm doing with my main project anyway. And it was a delight to build a circle. After having plotted out this 128 block diameter circle, the diameter of the nether hub is 37 blocks, which felt a lot more achievable within a day.
Oh yeah, once you've built one of those large circles, anything smaller just feels like candy, right?
Yes,
like
it's a cakewalk at that point. Yeah, like what even are angles? Like you can knock that out pretty easily. How about you, Joel? What's new on the Citadel?
So the West Hill River Inn, which has retained its name, is now complete. I actually went through the process of finding the West Hill Inn inside the town and renamed it to the Spruce River Inn. So now the rivers are inn themed. The inns are matching the rivers that they are adjacent to. So I went through and I finished this up. I had just started, I think, the cellar last episode. And so I went through and I added the details like dry storage, grain spilled on the floor. I used the tables and chairs data pack to create some benches and some shelving and things with the armor stand data pack. There's a laundry area. First time I've ever tried to do something like that in Minecraft. I think it worked out pretty well for a medieval thing. I'm not sure how it would handle like a modern laundry area, but for a wooden wash basin and a bunch of folded linens, it seems to look pretty good. I actually added a linen chute because it is a small inn. I thought that could be kind of handy and fun. That. Thanks, man. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I really like using the armor statues data pack, especially because you can use either a mini block, which we have through the Wandering Trades data pack, or a full block. And when you put it either in the hand or the head slot of the armor stand, you get two different sizes of blocks, both of which are different than a full-size block. So you can have like a pumpkin that looks sort of like a real-size pumpkin as opposed to a meter wide pumpkin on a shelf, which is fun. So that kind of stuff was nice to kind of lay in the details. I also added a little hidden passageway just because you can. And it's Minecraft, and I like doing that kind of stuff just for little Easter eggs for people to find. So that's in there as well. And then after that was the inside of the inn finished. I moved on to outside landscaping. I did the front rose garden, which is like a tiered stone garden that goes down to the main road, includes like the entryway and the path up to the main door. And that's just a combination of poppies, rose bushes, and weirdly acacia leaves seem to be the best match for the rose bush green. I tried azalea because I usually use a lot of moss and azalea in my gardens and stuff, but the azalea green just looked kind of weird next to the roses because the roses are so old school primary green in Minecraft that they didn't really work. I did get into the moss and stuff once I got into the garden walls and getting away from the roses. Then the azalea and the moss carpet all seemed to work really, really well together.
I really like the rockery kind of style of the rose garden as well. Like that looks like absolutely something that could exist in real life, like outside of the inn, and tying the color of the flowers to the color of the roof and everything makes everything look kind of a piece.
Thanks, man. Yeah, I had originally planned it as a tiered garden, but I wasn't quite sure what the flowers were going to be. I was testing out a number of different too tall flowers. I knew I wanted kind of have both, But once I decided on mangrove and other red blocks as the main gradient in the roof of the inn, things like peony and lilacs kind of clash with it because of how purple and magenta they are. So I went with the roses, and it seemed to work a lot better. That and azure blue because they go with the white in the calcite. I did manage to get some extra color in the back garden, though. The back garden is split in half with a path that goes from the back door to the back gate. And on one side, I've got a small vegetable garden, like nothing crazy, just kind of enough to feed probably the people that live and stay at the inn. There's potatoes and beets and carrots. And I added some netherwort just because the bright red complements the roses that are around. And I added a wood pile, again, using the armor statues data pack to have like an axe embedded in like a chopping block. Just little touches.
That. Yeah.
Thanks, man. Yeah.
And the little, are those mob heads on the andesite walls? The smooth stone? Yeah, that is such a cool detail. Wow.
Thanks. I really like the Wandering Trades data pack from Vanilla Tweaks because you get mini blocks of all the different building blocks in the game, and it gives a real function to the Wandering Trader, something that I'm sure you're very familiar with. And it's great for endgame because like I don't need any of the trades that the Wandering Trader has for traditional vanilla Minecraft stuff. Like I don't need saplings or dye or anything like that. But when it comes to getting those mini blocks, it's really handy because you just never know when you want to put something down. Like I've used them in blacksmiths shops as ore or little chunks of metal or gems. And what I like so much about them is that you can put them on angles. And in this case, they're straight, but on angles, they work really, really well to kind of break up that grid of Minecraft. And same with the chopping block and having the axe in an armor statue's hand and then make the statue invisible. And then the axe is on an angle. So it's just enough to try to give a little bit of life. Like someone has recently been through there and just kind of threw the axe down for safekeeping as to where they know where it is, that kind of thing. And I find that those little touches really, really help. And I also really like using campfires as, extra firewood laying around. It seems to work really well.
Yeah.
And I was able to fit in a lot of color on the other side. So same sort of idea, echoing the rose garden from the front with roses and poppies. But I also worked in some
coral, right?
Coral, yeah. Some saturated slabs. I've got coarse dirt slabs for people that don't know. And so I've got the coral on the coarse dirt slabs that are, of course, waterlogged so they don't die. And then I added a trellis with some glowberries, which did two things. It helped me balance out the yellow coral with the yellow and the glowberries, but also I don't have to have a lantern out back because the glowberries are enough light to light up the entire backyard of this little inn. So it really worked out quite well. And I was surprised at just how much color I could work in. I was worried that things like the carrots and the beets and the potatoes might clash with things and feel kind of like a rainbow barf, but it actually worked out quite well. I'm liking the kind of Disney cartoony way that the backyard is kind of going.
Yeah, I think it's my favorite part of the build. I just love these little moments in Minecraft that you get, these tight little spaces that feel very, very lived in. That's like my favorite thing to try to go for in my world, where like, there's like the houses in the village, but in every house has like a little back garden where like you get almost a little slice of life. Here's where they're, like you said, hanging up their laundry or keeping their axe or, I love those little moments in this game.
Thanks. I'm still learning. I'm trying to pick up different tips as I watch, creators like Corrales or B-Dubs and those people that are just so really good at. I find a real balance of making a Minecraft interior feel full and busy, but not overwhelming, not cramped, which is difficult because of the nature of the game with like meter wide walls and all that kind of stuff. So it's a little tricky, a little easier on the outside garden because you don't have a roof to kind of make it feel so claustrophobic. But I do like those little details because I'm not someone that's going to be populating the town with villagers. So there needs to be some other idea of life. And the other way that I do it is with paths. And so I've got path texture all around. And the last thing I started just before the weekend was over was moving on to the riverbank. And so there's a path that goes down to the riverbank. Originally, it was going to be like a dirt path, but I realized that it was going to be far too steep to do with the amount of space that I had. So I turned it into a wood staircase. And that kind of leads to where that little secret passage comes out on the left. And it's just the tip of the iceberg. The entire west bank of the West Hill River has to have some details on it. But now that I've got these major points of interest, I can kind of fill in some of the empty space with just like bushes and grass and bone meal and just the average kind of like blend of normal landscaping. I don't think there's any major points of interest left. I might put a little bit of a beach somewhere, but honestly, it's going to be pretty straightforward. So I should be able to finish that up this week.
It's looking great, man. Can't wait to see how it continues.
Cheers, thanks. Moving on to the news, Minecraft Java Edition Snapshot 24W12A was released on March 20th. Experimental features in 24W12A, trial chamber generation. Trial chambers now generate slightly more rarely and a bit more spread out from one another. Trial Chamber Explorer maps can now be purchased from cartographer villagers leveled up to the journeyman status. Explorer maps point to a nearby trial chamber. The heavy core block can now be waterlogged when placed, survives lava flows, can be mined most efficiently with a pickaxe, has adjusted destroy time and explosion resistance. Advancements have been added. Minecraft Trial Edition, step foot in a trial chamber. Under lock and key, unlock a vault using a trial key. Blowback, kill a breeze with a deflected wind charge. Who needs rockets? Use a wind charge to launch yourself upwards of 8 blocks at least. Crafters crafting crafters. Be near a crafter when it crafts a crafter. Lighten up. Scrape a copper bulb with an axe to make it brighter. And overkill. Deal 50 hearts of damage in a single hit using the mace. Technical changes in 24W12A. The datapack version is now 36. This brings in more item components, which can be adjusted in data packs, including the ability to classify something as food or as a tool, control over maximum stack sizes, allowing items to stack up to 99, control over maximum amount of damage an entity can take before it is destroyed, and whether the item is fire resistant, as well as control over whether an item's tooltips display at all. More details can be found in the Minecraft.net article changelog linked in our show notes. The resource pack version is now 30. Map decoration icons have been split from the former map_icons PNG to use an atlas loaded from the textures/map/decorations directory. Added trial chambers map decorations icons. The process of upgrading your pick can be assisted by using an automated slicer tool linked on Mojang's GitHub page. Notable bug fixes in 24W12A. Some GUI textures can no longer be transparent in Minecraft. Wind charges go through non-full blocks instead of colliding. Wolf variant not present in advancement criteria. Heavy core has no required tool. Heavy core cannot be oriented despite its block states suggesting otherwise. And carpet on powder snow no longer negates fall damage. Those bugs have been fixed. The full list of bug fixes can be found in the Minecraft.net changelog, linked in our show notes at despawnchunks.com.
Something we thought about covering last week but decided to save it for this week is the Marketplace Pass. Minecraft.net published a Say Hello to Marketplace Pass article on March 13th, 2024. To quote the article, Marketplace Pass is a monthly subscription that gives you access to 150 plus pieces of Minecraft Marketplace content. You can find skin packs, adventure worlds, survival spawns, mashups, skins, texture packs, and other DLC. With Marketplace Pass, we handpick 150 plus of some of the community's most loved packs every month for you to play and enjoy with your subscription. Each month you can also collect a new set of character creator items to wear when you head into your adventures. End quote. Marketplace Pass is currently priced at $3.99 US, with variable pricing in other regions, but a 30-day free trial is available if you want to just test it out. It is linked to your Microsoft account, so you should have access to subscription content on all supported devices where you play Minecraft Bedrock Edition. The article also goes on to explain that Realms Plus has the same content offering, but includes a personal server at an additional expense, so Marketplace Pass is really aimed at solo players and is priced to match.
Before we dive into this week's snapshot, Mog, because you're here, we would love to get your thoughts on the brand new mace that was added in last week's snapshot.
Oh man, yeah. That was out of left field. I did not see the mace coming at all. But I think it's really, really fun. I think it's a huge step in the right direction for Mojang just to do something that like no one was really asking for, but just adds a lot of fun to the game. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think they've been so focused for years now on like sort of upgrading old parts of the game. You know, like, okay, we're going to do another update. We're going to adjust the caves and the mountains and, the deserts. They've slowly been going through and like basically just modernizing all the old aspects of the game. But once in a while, I think it is really nice to just get something brand new, totally unexpected, like the mace. And so I think that was a really welcome addition. I'm just really interested to see where they're going with the heavy core. Like, I really hope it gets another use other than the mace. It seems like it will to me. Because like the one thing about 1.21 that really like doesn't sit well with me is like the whole scoot thing only being used for dog armor, and then the turtle scoots are only used for like the turtle helmet. Like I don't love having so many different items that only have like one single use. So I really hope we see the heavy core get like one other really interesting mechanic. But other than that, I'm loving the mace. I think it's really creative.
It is interesting that they've added a couple of other attributes to the heavy core this week that maybe hint towards its origin, and the fact that it can be waterlogged, the fact that it survives in lava, and I guess the destroy time and explosion resistance, I presume, have been increased from its previous incarnations. So it's sort of on par with netherite in terms of like what you imagine to be the density of material. And obviously like the fact that it's a really heavy mace head and that has this kind of, dropping from height onto something and completely flattening it effect. I think they are setting this up maybe to have some other function, but the fact that it is heavy is really now like very overstated almost. Like they're definitely giving it some character, which is odd for a block that, like you say, only has one use currently as a crafting ingredient, and you can place it in the world, but it doesn't seem to have any real function when placed. Now, naturally, with it being an explosion resistant block and having some of these properties, technical Minecrafters might find something to do with that. The way that, you can use ancient debris as a pushable but non-explosive block, like a blast-resistant block in some like TNT tree farm designs and whatnot. So you can imagine people using the heavy core for stuff like that, but only as a novelty, not as anything that really is unprecedented functionality that hasn't appeared in the game in another form. So I do think they've got something up their sleeve with the heavy core, especially since in the YouTube video that they published where they explained a bit about the mace as an addition, Ulraf and the other developer whose name I forget, apologies, but their username wasn't on screen, and the usernames are the ones that I typically remember. They mentioned that there was going to be a new way to get hold of the heavy core, which might be even more difficult than just finding it randomly in a vault. They are planning on making it more difficult or a rarer find in survival gameplay in future, which some people have obviously taken that concept and run with it a little bit, but it does kind of hint at the idea that there might be more to it than that, and maybe the way we get the heavy core is related to its ultimate purpose.
Yeah, it definitely seems like they're teasing something with it, so I'm really curious to see what it is. The only other thing about the mace, I've seen a lot of debate online about the way it actually looks. And I like, people were basically saying they thought it should be a 3D sprite in your hand, sort of like the trident has the extrusion to it, or I'm not even sure how to articulate this, but the trident has like that 3D quality to it that the other items don't really, the other tools don't really. And I do think I tend to agree with that criticism. Maybe not even that it needs to be 3D, but just that the texture might need a little bit of reworking or tweaking. But other than that, I'm really, really interested in it. What do you guys think about the aesthetic of the mace? I saw a lot of debate about that on Twitter.
I've been thinking about it since last week, and I wonder if they could split the difference. I don't know if it would look good, but we have that pixelated handle for things like the sword, the pickaxe, the axe, that kind of thing. And then the rest of the weapon or item is also that flat pixel art that's just been like made 1 pixel thick. But if you had the handle of the mace as it exists now, but then changed the head of the mace to be a full cube, like a 6-sided texture that you have, just like the heavy core is when it's placed in the world. That I wonder if that would look okay, or if that would be meshing to art styles, because essentially that's kind of what happens in the game, right?
Well, so interesting enough, I think that's how it is in Minecraft Dungeons. I'm going to post a little screenshot in the chat. But
you're right.
The top screenshot that I've just posted is the current mace texture in Java Edition, at least. And then, yeah, the bottom one is, I believe, how it looks in Minecraft Dungeons. So it would be interesting to see how that would translate into the main game if they took a similar approach. Especially because I think the current texture doesn't, it sort of looks like the heavy core, but it's not like exact. So I wonder, maybe them fleshing out the heavy core itself so much, maybe they are gearing up to do something like this, and that's just a placeholder sprite. It's hard to say.
I wonder if the efforts here are to try to not copy Minecraft Dungeons. I'm with you. I think that would be better. I think that it would work better that way. But I wonder if they're just making that conscious effort to just not go straight to putting Minecraft Dungeon stuff in Minecraft, because it then sets the expectation that some players might run with and say, oh, we're going to get all kinds of stuff from Minecraft Dungeons, right?
Mm-hmm.
It might even be as simple as most 3D looking objects. If it's modeled in 3D when you hold it in your hand, it's placeable. And a lot of the sprite-based things, which are just, like you said, widened sprites to make them look a little bit thicker, are either tools or food that you can't place in the world. And so I wonder if maybe they tried it out with the mace initially, but it looked too much like a block on the end of a stick, and you might expect to be placing blocks with it instead of using it as a weapon. So there might just be a bit more synergy for them between the mace's flat texture and the existing tools that make it obvious that this is a weapon right away, instead of something that you use as a different kind of tool.
Well, here's a question that they themselves brought to my mind in the patch notes this week. And we've been saying it a couple times here on this episode, in that calling the heavy core a block. Is it a block, or is it an entity? Is it like a head when you put it down? Like, is it right? Like, because it's not a full block. It's not like netherite would be a good example, or ancient debris. Like, those are blocks, right? Full meter by meter. But the heavy core is the size of a conduit, right? Like, roughly. Is a conduit a block, or is that considered something else?
I think technically speaking, it's considered a block, although, you know, you are you're stretching the definition of block at this point, I think, because we like to classify blocks as just like the largest possible size.
Yeah.
And then there are sort of exceptions to every rule, right? Like, you might think of chests as blocks, but they're technically tile entities or whatever when you place them in the world. So there's
because they've got an inventory, right?
Yeah, and I think all of the technical under the hood language is going to differ a little bit from the way they want players to experience the game. So it's an unusual one. Moving on a little bit here to stuff like the advancements that they've added. Speaking of the mace, it was fairly clear that they don't plan to nerf the damage output of the mace, from the fact that they've now added an advancement that requires you to deal 50 hearts of damage in a single hit. Not only that, but 50 hearts, because each heart represents 2 points of health. That's 100 damage. And that's basically you one-shotting an iron golem, right? I'm fairly certain that's a 50 heart mob. And I think if you're dealing 50 hearts or more, then there aren't many mobs that you can deal that to that might still survive. So you're looking at the Warden, the Ender Dragon, and the Wither at that stage. I think the mace is here to stay from a damage mechanics perspective. The one thing I have seen this week is that a bug fix is in the works for using Elytra with the mace, and I think that makes sense. I think if you don't allow players to build up that kind of falling damage playing with Elytra, then you don't end up with situations where it's easy for them to recover from a drop if they overshoot and don't hit the mob on the way down, and it's more difficult to like angle your shot if you're falling without the assistance of wings being able to direct you slightly better. So I think that makes sense for the mechanics they're hoping for from the mace.
Yeah, I'll have to maybe download the snapshot and play around with it, because I haven't actually experienced it, so it's hard to tell just from the videos and GIFs I've seen, or GIFs. I don't want to start that debate.
I was going to say, you're one of those.
And it's hard to tell from what I've seen how easy it actually is to land a hit. Have you guys played around with it at all?
Yeah, I jumped into the Snapshot on the day it came out, and I tried to find it in survival first, but ended up cheating in, or like flying around trial chambers and cheating in keys to let me use the vaults, just to see how hard it was to get. But then the first thing I one-shot was a villager, and the second thing was an iron golem. And I did that part in survival. I like stacked up 64 blocks, kind of guesswork as to how much damage it was going to do. And yeah, it's fun. It's really quite fun to use. I mean, we've done this on the SOS server recently, where you're falling from build height to bedrock and getting the caves and cliffs advancement for doing that. Mm-hmm. It's kind of a similar rush of like, you're falling, and you're often falling from heights that you're like, I will die if I hit the ground. So there's a definite risk, and the adrenaline that comes with that risk definitely kicks in. And then the satisfaction of one-shotting anything is sometimes my favorite stuff in video games, especially games where you often have to struggle for survival. Like playing through Elden Ring and getting to the point where I can one-shot stuff with a weapon that I've souped up in later game is always really satisfying. And the mace brings that kind of satisfaction using it. I think it's going to be one of those weapons that's easy to just play around with, but then once you've mastered it and you're using wind charges to get a bunch of extra fall damage before you hit something, combined with the fact that wind charges shouldn't provide any extra fall damage if you land from that jump because of the mechanics of those. They're going to limit the fall damage that you take if you boost your jump to begin with. It'll make the mace relatively safe to use at short range. And so I think players are going to have a bunch of fun playing around with that and just one-shotting any creeper that looks at them funny for a while.
And with what you said earlier, Jonny, about them offering another way to get the heavy core, potentially even more challenging, and them also moving trial chambers to be sparse, like farther apart, less likely to be stumbled upon, keeping the mace at its current power level tracks with making it a little bit more challenging to find. Although I guess if you have a cartographer, then you're going to get an arrow straight to the latest trial chamber or the nearest trial chamber. But then again, I guess there's no guarantee there that you're going to get a heavy core either.
Yeah. And I think the maps are going to make it easier to get the heavy core, in my experience, just because you'll need to go through a couple of trial chambers unless you get really lucky to obtain the heavy core to begin with. Assuming it stays as part of trial chambers, that is, which, we're not certain whether it will or not. But I think in general, having explorer maps to trial chambers is going to take a lot of the frustration out of going caving for 2 hours and not finding one. Especially now they're spread out from each other and they're going to generate more rarely. I think if they were going to do that, then they definitely needed to help players find them in some way. And I think it's also a really nice new lease of life for the cartographer, because they're going to be back in demand now that players are looking for underground structures where woodland mansions and ocean monuments are relatively easy to find on the surface. The cartographer having trial chamber maps is going to make them infinitely more useful to the average survival player.
I'm all for updates to the cartographer, especially if it means an update to the cartography table where we can actually use it in builds and place it without having it only strike one direction and be usable.
Yes, that would be so amazing. Something that I've been thinking about that's really interesting is I think this is one of the first times that Mojang has added something as like a clutch mechanic intentionally, because we've had water bucket clutching, we've had, you could ender pearl, bed, hay bales, like there's things that break your fall, but this seems to be them seeing people doing clutches on YouTube or like in parkour and stuff, and almost like reacting to that and adding in another way to do it, which I think is really, really cool. It kind of reminds me when, before rockets powered Elytra, people were using knockback bows to sort of launch themselves, and Mojang saw that and decided to add the fireworks as like a intentional version of that mechanic into the game. And I think that's some of the most successful features in the game are when they react to what the community is already doing, and just sort of iron it out and make it more of a part of the overall games ecosystem.
I think we said last week that this is going to usher in a new era of trick shot videos.
Yes, 100%.
The old kind of like fall from build height onto a ladder whilst wearing a pumpkin on your head kind of things, right? Like it's going to be stuff like that.
720 no scope.
all over the place, I'm sure.
We'll have to meme it together with people losing their minds after somebody flips a bottle onto a table.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
just have the mace hit coincide with everybody in that room just like, whoa,
Yeah,
what
totally.
just happened? Speaking of map makers, though, I imagine a lot of them are going to be pretty happy with those data pack changes. For me, the one that stood out was the quality of life change that you may want to change the stack size to more than 16 for a few items, such as snowballs, empty buckets, eggs, signs, hanging signs, honey bottles, banners, written books, ender pearls, anyone, and even armor stands. If you are so inclined, you could have a data pack that say, hey, these have normal stack sizes, just like everything else in Minecraft, which would be great on end game servers like mine, where you've got ender pearls coming out your ears in your storage system.
Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
the one that stood out to me was the tools, at least for adventure map making. Like, you could really create your own unique tool. Like, let's say that you want an arrow to have some sort of special property for digging, I don't know, only terracotta or something like that. I think that's now possible, more or less. So that also has some really interesting implications.
You could have players being able to use flint to break cobblestone and kind of have more of an early man, like early tools kind of vibe to it.
Yeah,
And, it opens up more opportunities for players to add custom items, even if they do have to cannibalize existing items in order to replace them. I think that makes a lot of sense for data pack makers in this case.
Well, there's also the tools that just no one gets to use anymore, because once you're at diamond or netherite, you never look back. I mean, you've got wooden tools and gold tools that you could turn into, in a data pack, like whatever you want, right?
Yeah, you can turn them into food now if you want to. Like a lot of people are like sword swallowing acts are going to become a big thing in Minecraft now, because you can actually eat a sword if you apply a certain data pack to it. So yeah, there's lots of fun, and I think data pack makers and map makers are still hanging on for a couple of things to be included in the item component system, but it seems like it's coming along in leaps and bounds with each new snapshot, which is great. Before we move on to emails, Mog, I know you had a lot to say on the subject of trial chambers, because they're another potential structure that you can have in Superflat now. And so without wanting to skip ahead to our main discussion, can you tell us what the existence of trial chambers means for the average Superflat player?
Yeah, these things are absolutely huge. They're making a lot of things accessible for the first time in 12 years. So basically, we've not had an underground structure other than the mine shafts that can just spawn in any biome, because, like, for example, like the ancient cities are limited to the deep dark biome, and then dungeons are actually features; they're not structures. Which are slightly separate classification in the game. So, like, another example of features would be lava and water pools, amethyst geodes. So structures and features are like two slightly different things. This is one of the first times we're getting a new underground structure that can just be in any biome at all. So that means they are Superflat compatible, and not just for the classic preset. For like almost any preset, they will be appearing. It's looking like it. And they were at least about as common as villages. I haven't had the chance to see now that they've reduced the rates slightly, how common they now are. But Superflat has this weird quirk where it at least the classic preset is locked to only generate village structures. But if you have an old Superflat world from before 1.18, and then you upgrade it to post 1.18 when the world height got lowered, there's a small part of the code that basically broke to where it's no longer locking the structures that generate in the classic preset. So what that means is after 1.18, I was able to, for the first time, to get strongholds, pillager outposts, mine shafts, and abandoned portals, or ruined portals, I think they're called, in my world. And now trial chambers will be there too. But that also means that my bedrock layer on my Superflat world is at Y0, not at Y -64. So most of the trial chambers are actually going to spawn below bedrock on Superflat worlds. So you'll kind of probably want to get an elytra and then just fly around below bedrock looking for entrances. Will probably be how it looks to loot these things. So it's going to be a really, really unique looting experience, probably somewhat akin to going end city busting. But there's so many things in these trial chambers. So first of all, you can get diamonds from them. So I haven't looked into the actual drop rates from the the little spawner things, but it could potentially be a better source of diamonds in Superflat than End City raiding, because diamonds are used in jukeboxes, armor trims, fireworks. There's a few other things that you need raw diamonds for. So otherwise in Superflat, you're just going to want to trade for diamond tools and armor from the villagers, right? But for a few specific things, you do need raw diamonds, and they're hard to get. So it's a new source of that. There's a small room in Trial Chambers. It's like a dead-end hallway, and it contains 12 blocks of deep slate. There's about a 50% chance to find one of these rooms in any given trial chamber, and that'll be the first ever source of deep slate in Superflat. Previously, it was completely impossible to get, and so if I want to build with it in any bulk quantity, I'm going to have to raid hundreds of trial chambers to get a decent amount of it, but still, even just that potential is extremely exciting for me as a builder, because deep slate is that perfect in-between from black stone to like the more gray of stone, right?
It is absolutely wild to me to imagine deep slate tiles being as rare as like netherite blocks to you. But like,
yeah, exactly.
You have to evaluate certain things based on their abundance or complete lack of abundance. And so the fact that, you can find 9 blocks of deep slate in a random corner of a structure that the average player is not going to bat an eyelid about, and to you it's one of the most important things, just makes me weirdly happy.
Yeah, like even something like brown dye. Like I can only get that from the Wandering Trader. I can only trade for a few at a time. So like brown candles on my world are like extremely rare. Like I treat them like this hot commodity. It's so funny how you value different things based on their rarity. But the big one, the really, really big one for me is snowballs. There are rooms in the trial chambers with both powder snow and then dispensers with snowballs in them. Powder snow is brand new, and then the snowballs will let me craft snow blocks, add a pumpkin on top, and we've got a snow golem, so that will give you infinite access to snow and snow layers. So yeah, that's huge. I've never had access to snow for the 12 years that I've been playing Superflat.
Wow.
So I am just so ridiculously excited because I have plans for a whole winter biome area in my world, and I was going to have to use, wool and smooth quartz and carpet, but now I can actually do a decent winter area for the first time in literally over a decade. And then amethyst is actually now going to be attainable as well. You can find amethyst crystals in some of the loot chests, and that actually unlocks a lot because we can get allays on Superflat because of the pillager outposts, but we couldn't breed them. So now we can breed the allays. We can craft tinted glass for the first time. It unlocks the spyglass plus the 3 advancements that go with the spyglass. And being able to add a purple trim to any of your armor. Sadly, the only thing that's still missing is the calibrated skulk sensor, since I still can't get the original skulk sensor to craft it. But that actually unlocks a deceptive amount of things. And then you can also find bamboo planks and scaffolding in some of the chests as well. I can't get bamboo in Superflat. And you still can't get actual bamboo, so it's non-renewable. But if you looted enough of these chambers, you could get enough planks to craft most of the bamboo blocks. So I probably won't be building with them much, but if I ever wanted to make like a museum with every block obtainable in Superflat, I could at least get most of the bamboo family, just not the stripped or the block of bamboo, right? Like the equivalent of the log is still inaccessible. And then tough, the whole trial chamber is made out of tough blocks. So not only is everybody else getting the new tough blocks, but also the original ones have never been accessible in Superflat. And there's one last small thing, which is the dead bush, which I'm really looking forward to. I've never been able to decorate with dead bushes, and it's a small thing, but as a builder, any little decoration I can unlock makes my day. So it is a long list of things that the trial chambers are bringing to Superflat, and I'm beyond excited because it's not every update that we get much in Superflat.
And yeah, that's such an interesting perspective on the game, because I was thinking through it when you were talking about bamboo and thought, oh no, you can find bamboo in jungle temple loot chests sometimes. But then I thought, no, those are biome specific. And so like the fact that the trial chamber is biome agnostic is actually super important for it appearing in your world.
Yeah, and I'm like kind of like the number one advocate for what you referred to as biome agnostic features. Like,
yeah,
I because it's not just the classic Superflat preset either. Now that I've been doing these challenge worlds, there's the desert preset, which is in the desert biome. There's the Snowy Kingdom preset, which is in one of the cold biomes. I forget which exact one it is, but all of these things, you can get really far in all of these biomes, but there's just one or two features that are like completely biome locked still. And I'm a big advocate for most of the big like key features of the game should be biome agnostic, in my opinion. Maybe not dimension agnostic, but at least biome agnostic, if that makes sense.
Sure.
And that really sets the stage too for our discussion later, because for people in our audience that are not familiar with a Superflat world, as I'm not, it sounds like the last time that I played modded Minecraft where I started over again, fresh start, no advancements, like nothing, no tools, and just had all these ideas of what I wanted to use. But after 5 or 6 years on the Citadel, I was like, oh wait, I don't have access to that block. Oh wait, I can't mine that yet because I don't have a diamond pickaxe. Like just things like getting cobblestone and realizing, crap, I have to smelt this before I can place it, if I wanted stone and stuff like that. It must be such a unique experience to be going back and forth between Minecraft SOS and Superflat world. And then also, like you said, looking at these snapshots and realizing the kind of things that are going to be opening up for that Superflat experience, because after that long in such a restricted space, not just physically in terms of the Superflat, but also the block palettes that are available to you are like very limited, it sounds like.
Oh, I've been having so much fun on SOS with the block palettes, and it's funny you were saying like it must be kind of nice to not have the pressure because that the SMP is not going to last forever. But I've fallen so in love with these blocks that I'm actually going to have a really hard time letting go. I want to last as long as I can, because even just getting to blend from like tough to acacia to stone is like, oh man, it's like the perfect gradient. It's going to be hard to let go for sure.
I'm actually surprised that the biomes don't happen in Superflat. I would have thought that would have been almost an interesting experiment to see what they look like in a Superflat world, as opposed to just not allowing them to spawn at all.
I have so many opinions on that. That's actually an email. We'll save it.
Yes. That is the subject of our second email. So we should get into the first email at least before we get too far away from the mace and everything. So
sure.
As always, if you'd like to email the show, the email address is spawnchunkmail@gmail.com. We also want to extend a quick invite to anybody who's listening to the show to send in a one-sentence question to the show for episode 300. We're on episode 290 right now, so you've got about another 9 episodes worth of time to submit that, and then we're planning an all Q&A episode to celebrate that milestone. So we want to include as many members of the community as possible. Send in a one-sentence question about anything you'd like to ask us, whether it's about Minecraft, podcasting, other video games that we play, our inspiration, various life experiences, etc. As long as we keep the questions light and fun, send those into spawnchunkmail@gmail.com and add 300 Q&A to the subject line of your email so they can be easily organized for the show. Looking forward to reading a bunch of those in the near future, but for now, this first email comes in from Flammable Flow MC, who is a landscape artist member of our Discord community, and the subject is more mace applications. Hi, Jonny, Joel, and Mog. I just listened to the most recent podcast about the mace, episode 289, and I was wondering if this weapon could also become a tool. The sword, famously a PvP weapon, also has applications as a tool. The sword can break some blocks faster than other tools can. Could the mace have an application like this? Maybe the mace will not be the recommended tool for mining specific blocks, but possibly some other purely survival application. This would make the mace more useful, potentially make it more desirable, and could incentivize some players to go out and find the materials to craft it. Flammable Flow MC burnt in some flammable flow.
It's a self-fulfilling prophecy.
It's a stretch, but we'll allow it. Good work.
I mean, bamboo and cobwebs are the two things that fall quickly to swords, right?
Yes, yeah. To my knowledge, that is the case. Yeah,
and I think a sword will break anything like 10% faster than the wrong tool would. but I could be wrong about that.
Interesting.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that, but those are the two things that sprung to mind. And at first I was hesitant about the cobwebs, but you get string, whereas if you use shears, you get the actual cobweb, right? Like that's the
Yes.
trade-off there.
Yeah.
So there's no utility knife in Minecraft, no machete. So for me, a sword swinging at bamboo feels more natural than using a hoe would. I know a hoe could maybe go the way of like a scythe might go, but I feel like the sword is probably the logical way to go there. I didn't say this last week because it felt like the obvious comparison. And we've heard before that Mojang does not plan to change the one block at a time nature of mining in Minecraft. But the first tool that came to my mind when I saw the mace were hammers from modded Minecraft that can mine a 1x3, 2x3, or a 3x3 area multiple blocks at a time, depending on how you upgrade it or what material it's made out of. So that would be my first go-to. But again, it kind of goes against the, I guess, philosophy that we know currently surrounding Minecraft gameplay. But I was thinking, specifically after watching some videos where people were doing those tricks that you used to do tutorials on Pix, where you'd push certain items with a piston into other blocks to create like little mini builds and little different items.
Yeah.
The idea of using a mace to bash blocks together, either to create a block inside of a block inside the world, kind of like a piston does, or maybe a new way of crafting or even breaking down blocks. So smashing cobble, gravel, or glass into sand could be interesting. Or smashing a tree trunk and then remove all of the leaves at once and have them drop whatever they're dropping. I don't know, it may be a little bit overpowered, but those are the two things that when I thought about hitting things, it was like breaking down materials into smaller materials or shaking something. Like, I feel like one of the things that I saw that the mace could use, and you might be able to chime in on this, Pix, where you used it, when you land that hit against an iron golem or something that you're falling on from height, do you think like a good screen shake would be good? Like, would be worth it? Like, something to increase the impact of that skill testing move, right?
Yeah, I think it could have something like that, and to emphasize, like, there's also a knockback effect that happens with the mace where surrounding mobs will get pushed back a little way. So there's a bit of a splash zone for it, and either having
sort of shockwave particle.
Yeah. I was going to say like a shockwave animation, similar to how we have the sweeping edge animation for swords in Java Edition. Stuff like that could be a nice way of demonstrating the area of effect and communicating that to players who aren't necessarily targeting a group of mobs with a one-hit weapon like that. So there could be something else to communicate that, and if it's used for something other than just an offensive weapon, you could definitely see an animation going along with that, like being able to smash it against a tree trunk, maybe have some apples falling out of leaves or something like that, and having that kind of shockwave whomp kind of like almost like a visual sound effect could work really well.
I never thought about apples dropping. That would be an interesting thing too. Instead of actually having the blocks be removed, so you're not destroying the tree, you're getting the drops from the tree without having to chop the tree down. So maybe it's a way to get saplings, sticks, apples without removing the tree. And as an end game item, that would make sense, right?
And would be kind of strange in a sense because that's the stuff that you need at the beginning of the game, and so it would sort of feel like you'd come full circle back to the start of the survival experience. Like, I don't see it being used as a mining tool, but I do like the crushing blocks into sand option, like naturally because it's renewable sand, but also I think it makes sense for something like the heavy core idea. Like, it could be another application of the heavy core rather than the mace. Like, if you crafted it into something more like a pestle and mortar, let's say, and some kind of grinding device that you could use to turn blocks into ground-up versions of other blocks. Like, I could see that being the case, whether in this update or in the future. And I think even if the mace isn't the ideal tool for anything in this update, it could be linked to future block additions, right? They have the opportunity to work that into future mechanics. An alternative to that, and to go back to everyone's favorite thing, discussing how this could be linked to the Ancient City portal, maybe it's the only tool you could use to break and obtain reinforced deep slate.
Oh.
And that could be used to maybe rebuild the ancient city portal into different formations, something more akin to the size of a nether portal, and you could divide
really
it up
interesting.
to switch it back on.
Yeah, I like that.
There was a comment from Elkhorn in our chat a few minutes ago about the heavy core resembling perhaps a crafting element of reinforced deep slate as well.
Yeah. And although the process of obtaining them, even right now, seems like you probably wouldn't want to craft it into something that just went away into a single block, at least unless that block was really significant to progression in some way. So I can see it being useful for the mace, but I can see myself feeling a little bit, preservationist about having heavy cores lying around and not wanting them to be turned into blocks that I then couldn't move.
I mean, this would be an inventory nightmare, but if I can walk around with the mace and smack stone brick slabs and stairs and turn them into cracked stone brick slabs and stairs, I am on board.
That would be really cool. That is a great idea. Where my mind went as soon as you read the email was, what if there was like a ground pound enchantment that you could apply to the mace, and then you could basically create a crater on the ground when you land with the mace that would scale to however high up you went, right? So, but I guess you could put a really big cooldown on it so it wasn't so OP. But if you fall from world height, maybe, and you smack the ground with this enchantment, maybe it creates like a blast the size of a charged creeper. Whereas, if you only do it from a few blocks up, it only breaks like 1 or 2 blocks. That's where my brain went, some sort of like ground pound mechanic, because I feel like they've had the, I always want to call them breeze balls, wind charges. They've had the wind charges working so well with the mace so far. I feel like tying that in even more would be really cool. And I haven't seen any like speculation about what the enchantments could be for the mace. So that's where my mind goes.
Well, moving into the main discussion, obviously with Mogswamp here, we want to focus on the Superflat specialist in the room. And with a 12-year-old Superflat world, Mog, you're probably one of the most dedicated players in Minecraft history, especially now that we know just how many sacrifices you've had to make in that Superflat world. So I was hoping that you could be here to help us unpack what makes Superflat so compelling as an experience in the game, and how it feels returning to default Minecraft in the Minecraft SOS series with Pixel Riffs and friends.
Yeah, I have so much to say because I've noticed that I'm not playing like the other SOS members. It's I guess old habits die hard. Like I was the first person on the server to really like build out a full trading hall with villagers, and I realized I was talking to some of the other members and I was like, yeah, I just need more emeralds so I can get redstone. And they were like, what? Like, what? They were starting to make fun of me. But I'm like, my brain says like, okay, yeah, glass is something you get from villagers. Lapis, redstone, those are things you get from villagers. I'm just so not used to the concept of going mining when I need resources. I want them like in my base on demand. So that's been really funny. Also, like I've been using a lot of andesite and diorite in my builds, and not having to go to the nether to farm a bunch of quartz to craft those blocks is really wild. Like I just find it and dig it out, and within a minute I've got stacks and stacks of the block I want to build with. That's really strange. I mean, like even just stone. I'm drowning in stone and cobblestone on the server, and I'm just amazed because anytime I need those things, it's going to a cobblestone generator or going to a stone generator. There's just no other way to get it in Superflat. So like the fact that you just like incidentally get it while mining out the room for your base is so bizarre to me. I'm like, I don't remember AFKing at my cobble farm. Where did I get this chest full of cobblestone? Oh yeah, I've been digging in Pix's hole.
It's a popular task on the server these days, which I'm very grateful for. But like, so your brain is obviously wired for Superflat and has been for a very long time. So let's untangle some of the wiring a little bit and talk about what got you into Minecraft in the first place. And I guess from there, the follow-up question is, when did you decide you wanted to make Superflat your main world?
Yeah. So I will always remember I was at the bus stop, in high school, and this kid every day was coming and just telling me about these TNT cannons he was making and obsidian pyramids and just ridiculous stuff. And it was nonsense to me at the time, but he kept telling me, don't get Minecraft. It will take over your life. He kept warning me, like, don't even get it. And I actually listened to him. I wasn't interested in getting it because I was like, I don't need another hobby that's gonna take over my life. And then my brother ended up getting it for for me for my birthday. And sure enough, 12 years later, here I am. But or probably more like 13 years at this point. But yeah, I really enjoyed the game right away, but I never really clicked with a survival world until I tried out Superflat. Because what I always relate it to is the roller coaster tycoon games. I grew up playing all sorts of tycoon games, Zoo Tycoon, Roller Coaster Tycoon. I was never a competitive gamer. I was always like the creative type, so I just want to be, chilling and making my own, like, the gardens in Viva Pinata are a great example, or Animal Crossing, games like that, right? And for me, Superflat was like unlocking the sandbox world in Roller Coaster Tycoon. Because if you guys have played that game, normally, like in the campaign mode, you've got like a pre-existing terrain and maybe a couple rides, and you've got a budget, and you've got to go in and like fix the park. And it's almost more of like a financial manager. And as a little kid, obviously, I had no interest in any of that. I just wanted to build roller coasters. And so in that game, when you unlock the sandbox mode, it's like a completely flat world with nothing in it, and you've got infinite money, and you can just kind of build to your heart's content and do whatever your little creative vision is. And that's how Superflat felt to me. But I really, really love terraforming. It's probably one of my favorite things about Minecraft is making my own landscapes. And I'm always like building off of the, having to build off of the existing game terrain. Whereas in Superflat, it's just this blank canvas. And I guess just like the artist in me that really, really appealed to me. And then having to, not being able to take any block for granted. Like everything that you see in my Superflat world was placed there by me. It was obtained through trading or some farm or some complex game mechanic. So yeah, you learn to value every little thing in the game on like a much deeper level. Like I've never built a trash can in my Superflat world because like I would never throw items out, you know what I mean? So yeah, I think it all just clicked into place for me when I first tried it. And when I first tried it was, I believe, 1.0, like when the game fully released was the first time they introduced Superflat worlds. And me and my best friend Jason decided to try it out. We got like a week in, and I was like, there's something here. Like this is really, really fun. Because for me, it ticked all the same boxes that Skyblock ticks, except that you're not having to constantly be bridging over the void.
Yeah.
There's like it's like basically it's Skyblock with a platform already in place for you. And yeah, it all clicked into place for me. I know it's definitely not for everybody, but I've met a lot of people who through my videos have discovered Superflat, and it clicks the same way for them. I think there's a very particular type of Minecraft player who it just works for them. And so I could just rant for hours about how much I love Superflat, but that's the gist of it.
That's the origin story right there. Yeah.
Yeah, and basically when I was playing with my friend Jason, what happened was I was like looking up tutorials on how to do things on a Superflat world, and there was none. There was no one else doing it at all. There was like maybe 1 or 2 posts on Reddit on r/Minecraft, and that was it. So I was like, all right, I'm gonna be the guy. I was a huge fan of Ethos Lab back then. His boat road, the Chocolate Island, that was like the era. And I was like, all right, I'm gonna be the Superflat guy. And it took about 10 years for it to gain any traction, but when it did, it really did.
and here you are mining 50 million dirt. It's it's the road only goes up from here. But I think that's great. Like I can see that mentality coming through from all sorts of other communities as well. Like the speedrunning community has a similar kind of niche mindset of like a really specific way they want to approach a game, and I can totally see the same influence coming in from other sandbox games. You know, you're playing like The Sims or Roller Coaster Tycoon or whatever, and you enjoy the feeling of having as blank a canvas as possible and putting all of your own vision into it, where I think some folks get intimidated by the emptiness of Superflat when they are used to the default terrain of Minecraft. I often find myself wanting to load up a creative default world to build stuff because I don't want to do as much terraforming in trying to figure out different height levels for a build and if there's going to be a staircase up to the doorway or whatever. And so I find terrain really helpful in that regard. But if you're the type of person who isn't intimidated by that and instead sees it as an opportunity to further impress your creativity on the world, then I think it's something you should absolutely go for.
Yeah, it's I have been having a lot of fun morphing the existing terrain on SOS into something else and like taking inspiration from what's already there. But there is just something really special about knowing that every little bit of terrain on a Superflat world was put there by you and conceived by you. I think like when I fly around my Superflat world on stream, a really common chat that I get is like, I didn't even know this was a Superflat world. And that's so gratifying to me because it's like, I've convinced people when I'm standing in the midst of my creation that this is actually just a normal Minecraft world. And only when I fly over that hill in the background does the illusion break and they're suddenly like, oh my God, that is not a normal world.
I feel like we've covered a lot of what a Superflat world entails, but if you have someone new in your chat that's looking to maybe try out Superflat, what's some of the advice that you would give them on their first outing?
Yeah, so I've actually gotten really good at the early game from doing these 100-day challenges on all the different presets. What I've found is similar about all the Superflat worlds is you have to just focus on villagers. Like if you can get a villager breeder, an iron golem farm, and a basic trading hall set up within the first like 10-ish days, then you're looking really, really good. But if you can't do that, then it starts to get almost annoying how long the early game lasts because if you're in the normal preset, you've got slimes constantly attacking you. And there's like not a great source of food and you've got like no building blocks to begin with. So I definitely recommend like basically whatever preset you're starting on, find a way to get villagers. So if there's no villages, then you're going to have to build a mob farm and try and get zillagers and convert them. But if there is villages, you want to basically sprint directly there, capture 2 of them and immediately start producing babies because otherwise it's just zombies will come through that first night and wipe out half the villagers and it starts to get a little bit frustrating. So if you can get over that initial frustration of those first 10 days, like I think some people really love that challenge and they're like, wow, this is really hard, I love it. But for other people it's like almost frustratingly difficult. But if you can just get those first few farms established, it's like so much easier from then on. So that would be my number one bit of advice is like rush those first few farms so that you can begin to have fun with the cool parts of Superflat and you don't just get immediately frustrated with the really difficult aspect of it.
I can see the comparison to Skyblock immediately. Like the villager thing, I was like, oh, wow, okay, I remember that. I remember that bottleneck frustration of like, I'm building everything out of cobblestone because that's all I have. That and one oak tree, right?
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, I just want to build this simple farm. Oh, I don't have redstone and I need redstone from the villagers. And yeah, so like everything basically stems from those villagers. So if you could just get those set up, like first couple days, you'll be a lot happier.
And then you've got to think about going to the nether to get like quartz for observers and like correct me if I'm wrong here, but the nether generates normally on a Superflat world, right? You still have like nether terrain. So if you really miss terrain in a perverse kind of way, you can go to the nether, I suppose. But
yeah, it's funny all the time. People are like, don't you wish that the nether and the end were also flat and matched? And I'm like, not at all, dude.
Yeah. Like imagine
I think if they did, I would have gone crazy like 10 years ago.
Imagine how difficult it would be trying to like go and get quartz in like a completely flat world and it just goes on for miles and you probably still have a bedrock ceiling above you as well, so it would just be this like even more desolate than the nether cavern already is.
I will say though, if you do like mob farming and that sort of thing, Superflat can also be really, really fun for a technical player because forget making a perimeter. It's already there. Day one, you make a mob farm, that thing is going to be as efficient as it can possibly be because you can build it at the lowest point in your world and light everything up, and there is nowhere else possible for a mob to spawn. So like I always really did enjoy that technical side of the game in, you know, the whole Psycraft sort of community and stuff like that. I always followed that side of the game. And if you're a little bit more technically minded, it can be really, really fun because you're not having to spend that upfront month digging out the perimeter and and spawn proofing all the caves, you know.
So we have an email that came in knowing that you were going to be on the show, and this one came in from Inkor the Second, fixing problems in Superflat. Hi, Joel Pix and Mogswamp. Since Mog is on the podcast this week, I wanted to bring my ideas on fixing some issues to Superflat Worlds. We don't know when the potential villager trading changes are coming, but we know that they will rely heavily on biomes. This will make Superflat Worlds miss out on the new trades. I propose that the overworld biomes generate in a new default Superflat preset. That way, already existing worlds can have the new trades once they arrive. I also think that slime chunks should no longer be generated, as this feature is not intuitive to the player and exposes technical aspects of the game which break immersion. It would be much better if there was a new cave biome that would replace the slime chunks instead. Previously generated slime chunks would still work in order to not break slime farms in existing worlds. This would make the lives of Superflat players, well, less annoying. I hope you like these suggestions, or at least that they inspire some interesting discussion on ways to improve the Superflat experience. Inkor the Second lived. Didn't expect that, did you?
So for people unfamiliar with the podcast, Mog may be included in this. The sign-offs, I don't know when exactly we started, but it was pretty early where everybody left a death message at the end of their sign-off for their emails. So yeah, we get a lot of creative death messages, and we always like to celebrate when somebody lives through an email.
Okay, that explains the first email too.
Yeah.
So this is a really interesting email. I especially the slime part of it, which I'll get to in a second. But as for the biome thing, this is like something I hear all the time. Like, why, you know, Superflat worlds should generate all the biomes. Why don't they generate all the biomes? And I think that would be a cool new preset to include in the list of, you know, Superflat presets included with the game. But I'm actually like quite against making it like the default Superflat world because I'm of the opinion that again, I said it a little bit earlier in the podcast, but I think most key game features should be accessible no matter what biome you play in. Because I think that's one thing that 1.16 did beautifully was make it actually possible to start in the Nether and get most of the way through the main progression of the game without having to go anywhere, because now you can craft tools from Blackstone. They added the piglin bartering. They added wood in the form of the fungus. And so I actually think that's really cool. I think we need more of that and not less of that. Because Superflat aren't the only single biome challenges. Some skyblock worlds are just one biome. There's actually a lot of different challenges in the game where you're locked to one biome. And I think that's really interesting and fun. So like, I'm just very against the villager trading update for that reason. I think like it's too key of a feature to lock behind biomes. I think things like armor trims are perfect because they're aesthetic. They don't really change the gameplay. They're fun to collect. But not necessary for the key gameplay loop of Minecraft. I think that is like the perfect sort of thing to encourage exploration in the game. But I think villager trading is a misguided way to do that same thing. I also think one of my main issues with adding all the biomes to Superflat is that it is like horribly ugly. So because it's such a highly requested thing, many people have made custom Superflat worlds that have every biome in them. The problem is that when the world is flat like that, the grass colors and the water colors become like really, really obvious when they're shifting, and it's like hideous. So it is fun and it's a cool challenge, but it's not super aesthetically pleasing. Yeah, it like someone just said in the chat, it's like a camouflage, like an army camouflage sort of look. So yeah, as far as the biomes, like while I do agree that like there should be a super flat preset with biomes because that's another fun, unique challenge, I also think that these villager rebalances need to be rethought because yeah, I'm not sure about biome locking really, really key mechanics of the game like that because it's a sandbox game and you should be able to play however you want to play, right? So if there's also large biome worlds where, you'd have to go, 100,000 blocks to get all the villager trades in. And I don't want to exclude those people either. So yeah, that's my thoughts on the biome thing. I don't know. What about you guys?
I think when it comes to evaluating how the villager trades are going to impact certain play styles, the two examples that always come to my mind are Superflat and Peaceful. Because if you consider that Peaceful players have to get zombified swamp and jungle villagers to even have access to those two types of trades, it's not going to happen for them because zombie villagers won't spawn. But then at least Peaceful players have the option to go and find the treasure enchantments that you're really looking for, like mending and whatnot, in structures, and you can find them more frequently in ancient cities if you've enabled the experimental trading changes, because they added that as another concession to not being able to find mending as easily. But Superflat players aren't going to have that option because ancient cities don't spawn with no deep dark biomes. So yeah, it is something that requires a more holistic overview of features, and I think that Superflat and Peaceful players may even be some of the reason why Mojang hasn't insisted in furthering the villager trading rebalance and that it stayed as an experimental data pack, because it seems like it's in the back of their mind, but there might be a better solution to it which can incorporate players of all playstyles.
I think it could work. I just think they need to do a lot of other things first. Like they need to probably get rid of the too expensive anvil thing. They would probably need to I mean, there's a whole list of stuff that they could do to make it more feasible, right? Like, you can still fish up mending books, but it's been kind of a meme lately that a bunch of creators have been trying to fish up mending books. It takes like 100 hours to get one mending book from fishing. So, like, if they just made that less rare, that would be another way to incorporate these villager changes without completely breaking things. So, I think, I'm not like anti-villager rebalancing. I think the whole villager system could still use some work. Of course, I think everybody's in agreement on that. I just think they need to like touch every aspect of it rather than just this one part of it, because it's like it's kind of just nerfing one aspect of it but not improving or boosting any other methods of finding those books.
Well, that's where I land too, is have more than one way. Like, sure, for the survival players, you got to make them walk around if that's what you want to get the mending books and the different trades in different biomes. But have there be other, maybe perhaps rarer, but still a way that's not 100 hours of fishing for those trades to be accessible, or the rewards for those trades to be accessible, so that other players and other modes can still have access to it. And it's like when you have a new item added to Minecraft that just crafts one thing. It's so much more rewarding when it does two things, or when they add something new that then crafts together with something from like 5 updates ago, and you're like, oh cool, now we can combine these two new things, or this new thing and this old thing to get a new thing. Right. And I like that aspect and that depth to the game when they do that. And I think that that's what this villager trade rebalance needs. It needs more than one way to do things. And I think right now
the villagers are the only way to lock in a trade that you want, right?
Right.
And every other way is pure RNG, like the enchantment table, pure RNG, fishing, pure RNG, loot tables, pure RNG. There needs to be some other way to influence the game to get the trade you want, right? But otherwise, it's just like complete randomness. And I think that's the part that's the aspect of it that's not that fun, is the pure randomness.
Yeah. I can see your point about the biomes looking really ugly too, because so many times in Minecraft I bump up against textures, specifically landscaping, that just don't work against one another, because I'm in a river biome and next to that is a sunflower plains in many areas around West Hill. and it just, the grass color doesn't work, or I've been using moss and this great moss trick, and then all of a sudden moss looks like puke in the river biome, and it just doesn't
Yeah,
work.
that's been happening to me so much when I've been digging out chunks of my perimeter, because there are areas where I'll go down through a dripstone cave and the grass color returns to something closer to neutral and it's the same color as moss, and I go, oh cool, great, and then it turns back into a jungle biome a little bit later, and I'm like, why does this suddenly look like garbage when I grow grass on this stuff? And it's because the jungle biome grass is so much greener. And yeah, like the saturation of that stuff throws me, when normally I'm so used to building with moss and I'm like, this is the greenest thing in the world, and it's just such a delight to apply this in biomes that don't have that kind of lush green color, but it looks totally different once you apply the jungle grass next to it.
I mean, not to go on too much of a tangent, but there was a suggestion I got that did have some interest to me, which is like a type of beacon that applies a biome in a radius around you. Could be
neat.
Kind of interesting, because that would give some control to the player. Like if you really, really wanted one corner of your giant circle that's like a savanna biome to not have that puke grass, as you're saying, you could like set up a little biome beacon, right, and just get that nice color. Or on my Superflat world, I could have like little mini biomes for different things that I need. I'm not sure how I feel about it. Apparently it's a feature in Terraria, which is where one of my viewers got the idea. But I'm not sure how I feel about it, but it could be interesting depending on how they did it. But that's another idea that I've seen floating around. But there was that second part of the email too, about the slime chunks, and that's not one I've heard before. And it's actually a really good point that like slime chunks use the chunk system, and like it's like a very technical like back end part of the game that's sort of being like surfaced as a gameplay mechanic, which is kind of weird, right? And like they said, very unintuitive. I've never really thought about that before. I actually personally, I love the challenge of slime proofing things in my world. Like I'll basically start by path blocking a slime chunk, and then from there I'm like, okay, I can add a slab here because they won't spawn on that, and like a trapdoor here, and like I'll build a wagon out of purely trapdoors, and that's still spawn proof. So I really like the challenge of it. But yeah, no, it's a really good point that like if you want to build a slime farm, you're probably going on chunk base or using mini HUD or using some like technical back end aspect of the game. There's like, how would a new player without going on the wiki ever figure out how slime chunks work? Like this is a really, really good point. And I do like the idea of a slime biome, like a new cave biome, because I think there could always be room for more cave biomes.
Yeah, I think I would love the idea of a slime-based cave biome. I will push back on the notion of slime chunks inherently exposing technical aspects of the game. I can see it happening in Superflat because it's so obvious with no terrain around you where individual spawns are happening specifically. But then, as you're exploring caves and encountering slimes naturally, it doesn't immediately come up of like, oh, this 16 by 16 area must be where the slimes spawn, right? Like,
right.
And by the time you are interacting with that as a mechanic in a default world, then you probably know a lot more about the technical side of the game and how mob spawns work and everything anyway. So
that's a good point, yeah.
Yeah, so I think there's a bit of community knowledge that kind of feeds into that impression that slime chunks are a lot more technical feeling than they are. I can totally see it in a Superflat world where you're trying to spawn-proof against this horde of slimes coming in during the day. But yeah, I think it's maybe... It merits a biome just because then it makes it a little bit more easy to find them. But I think... Going back to the trial chambers thing, I think having trial chambers that have those corridors that can sometimes have a ton of slime spawners in, even that makes an easy enough way of interacting with slimes as a mass-produced mob that means you don't even need to worry too much about slime chunks, and the occasional slimes that you find in caves will just be there for people who understand how that mechanics works and what they want to do with it.
It's definitely an interesting idea. I do think like, yeah, it would be a shame to get rid of such a unique spawn mechanic, because I don't think any other mob in the game has anything similar to slime chunks, and I think that is really unique and cool. So, I like half agree with the comment, and I definitely really like the idea, like you were saying, of the cave biome, like some sort of slimy biome. I mean, I can picture like just big slime pools, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like, I think that would be really cool, but. I do like the challenge of combating the slimes on Superflat. It's kind of like my whole brand at this point. Like my logo is based on a slime. So yeah, I'm probably gonna get a tattoo of a Minecraft slime. So
Wow.
You're committed. I'm surprised that tattoo isn't the Wandering Trader, to be honest with you.
I'm not. That one's where the sun don't shine.
That's a personal one. Yeah, that's just for
my
you.
tramp stamp. Yeah.
Right. So speaking of the Wandering Trader, I wanted to leave Incore's email behind and move back to our main discussion here about Superflat as a genre, and I wanted to ask which edition you think has had the biggest influence on Superflat gameplay over the years of Minecraft, and why is it the Wandering Trader?
Well, okay, so my gut reaction is the Wandering Trader. I mean, he's huge. He added a ton of new stuff. I mean, probably the biggest thing he added was all the different tree types. I mean, for 8 years or so, maybe 6 years, so I don't know, 6 to 8 years until he was added, I was locked to only using oak wood. Like literally, that was the only wood I could build with. So that was insanely big right there. But I can walk you guys through, I think, the 4 biggest updates for Superflat probably ever, other than 1.3 when villager trading was first introduced, because that was like probably the single biggest one.
Sure.
But then since 1.3, I think I narrowed it down to 4. There was 1.14, which introduced the Wandering Trader and a bunch of new trades to regular villagers as well. Then there was 1.16, which brought, things like piglin bartering and like a lot new nether features, but also that was the first time strongholds ever started glitching into Superflat worlds, was I believe 1.16.2. And then there's 1.18.2, which I call the Superflat update, because that was the first update where all structures started spawning in Superflat. So strongholds, ruin portals, abandoned mine shafts, and pillager outposts all started spawning in Superflat worlds for the first time in 1.18.2. And then there's 1.21 with the trial chambers and all those features I went on and on about earlier in the podcast. So I think those are the big 4 now, and it's really tough for me to decide which one is the biggest, because even just strongholds themselves, like the ability to get the elytra and shulker boxes for the first time in 8 years, was probably kept me from quitting my Superflat world, to be honest, because like you guys know how slow the game is before you get elytra and shulker boxes. Like it's almost like a whole other game. The pace is just so much slower, and it really limits what you can actually build. So yeah, it's really tough. It's really, really tough. It's one of those 4, but I'm not sure which.
Yeah, and it's wild to me that these are all completely different answers to what I would expect most default survival players to name as like the big updates. Like, 1.16 I think is universally acclaimed as a really solid update, because it was an update for the entire dimension, and so the Nether was like such a big deal for a lot of people. And I think people don't give 1.18 enough credit for the terrain changes because of the whole Caves and Cliffs update split and everything sort of feeling like it was all part of one big update. But I'd say it was 1.9 and 1.13 for me that really kind of kicked Minecraft into the next gear. 1.9 because it introduces elytra, and then 1.13 because of ocean updates and swimming and a ton of mechanics like that.
It's so funny because we're talking about just how opposite it is. 1.13 was probably one of the worst updates for Superflat.
Yeah, because like, where are the oceans, right? Like,
well, not only did it not add anything new, but it took away things. It actually biome locked squids, so I can no longer get ink sacs from squids directly.
Wow.
So like some updates actually end up taking things away. I call them extinct mobs. So I believe 1.6 took away rabbits. And then 1.13 took away squid. And then axolotls were taken away after 1.17. So those are the 3 extinct mobs. So yeah, some updates are so bad for Superflat that they take away features.
That's wild. That's so strange. And like, I usually laugh at the concept of people thinking that stuff was taken away, because it's usually like, oh, they changed the skin for a zombified piglin, or like they removed netherite hose from piglin bartering because that was busted, but you can still obtain them. But for you, it is genuinely like, it's an extinction level event for some of these mobs to not be available anymore. That's mind blowing.
We literally have entire lore in my world to explain why the squids were banished.
Oh man,
forever. Yeah,
that's so funny. But I mean, looking ahead to the future, then obviously you're talking about 1.21 being so influential in Superflat gameplay. Does focusing on Superflat lead you to being less interested in Minecraft updates because some additions like biomes just aren't going to register for you? They won't be accessible anyway? Or do you find yourself poring over each like new snapshot looking for new features that might give you access to resources you didn't have before?
It's definitely a little bit of both. Like when I determine that something is definitely not coming to Superflat, I kind of stop paying attention to it, because then like years later, when I go and play a vanilla world finally, like SOS, it's all brand new to me and it feels really, really special. And it's like, you know, I'm learning. You just taught me about the tough ore veins that go on forever.
Oh yeah, yeah.
You know, like little things like that, or like I didn't know really how to defeat an ancient city until you walked me through it. So yeah, I actually really like paying attention and trying to pick apart the updates, like you said, to see if anything's going to become obtainable. But the second I determine that it doesn't apply to Superflat, I kind of just turn it off so that it's all surprising and fun to experience when I eventually do get it for the first time. But I also think I'm just a little bit of a different player in that I can never get bored of my world, because I've just gone long stretches without a single new feature, years before, where like nothing really gets introduced to the Superflat world. And so my expectations for any update are extremely low.
Right,
I'm never really expecting to get much. Like I think there's a really big misconception about me. Even though I will advocate for single biome worlds and for Superflat worlds when I can, I'm never expecting Mojang to design their game around my extremely niche and weird way of playing.
Yeah.
Like, I completely understand that there's just going to be some updates where not a single thing changes for Superflat. So my expectations for any given update are extremely low, and my fun in the game doesn't really come from new updates. It just comes from myself, you know? So I feel like it's actually, you know, I'm always getting the question, like, how do you not get bored of Minecraft? How do you not give up? It's like, well, I feel like part of it is like, I've had the mindset for years and years that like what I have in my world is what I got, and I'm not expecting anything new to ever come to it. But when it does, it's a real treat, you know? So I'm like, yeah, I think that's part of it. And the other thing that's nice about the Superflat world experience is that when giant sweeping terrain changes happen or there's a new structure, I never have to like reset my world to get access to it, because it's like, you know, like there's no reason to reset. Like 1.18 is a great example. Like a lot of people started new worlds so that their spawn would have the new generation, right? There's no reason for me to do that. The generation never changes. So like, I think that's part of the reason I have a 12-year-old world, is because there's never really been a point where it made any sense to restart my world to get access to new features or anything like that. So yeah, I think I still pay attention to the snapshots, but like I said, once I determine something's not coming to Superflat, it is really fun to just tune out.
Yeah, I think it's great that you have almost the best of both worlds in that sense, where like big stuff can come along and you can start making plans for it, but then you can still leave yourself open to being surprised by the stuff that isn't relevant to your day-to-day. And, you know, we've been covering Minecraft news on this show for like 5+ years at this point, so while I try and keep it like a little bit fresh in my head every time I come to a new snapshot and check stuff out, or my world updates and I get to start making tutorial videos about it, I feel like there aren't as many surprises for me anymore. So the fact that you still get to keep some surprises in the game is awesome.
Yeah, I think that's a little bit of a issue with Minecraft's update style in general, is that like, because they're so transparent and give everybody these amazing snapshots, like by the time an update fully releases, like basically everybody's tried it out or is like kind of bored of the new features already. Like it's a little bit of an issue. So like I try to like self-police, you know what I mean? And just not look into anything or download the new snapshots unless it's super relevant to me. And that way, yeah, it all feels fresh and fun when the update finally does drop. But, you know, if you're covering the news, obviously you don't super have that privilege, but it's just like I get to just cover the Superflat news, which is fun for me.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of our listeners are going to be more tempted to try out Superflat if they haven't already, now that you've given it this glowing endorsement. And it's been great to pick your brain over the whole thing. But that is unfortunately all the time we have for this episode of The Spawn Chunks. So Mog, thank you so much for joining us. Where can our listeners find more of you and what you do?
Yeah, so I'm just Mogswamp on everything. Luckily, it's one of those names that's never taken anywhere. So you can find me at just Mogswamp on basically anywhere. Just like, as you said, just hit 2 million subscribers on YouTube. I was super excited about that. But I'm actually very reachable. Like, you can just join my Discord, discord.gg/Mogswamp, and I'm always around if you want to give me some Superflat news or ask me any Superflat questions. And I've also just overhauled my entire Patreon, patreon.com/Mogswamp. So pretty proud of the update over there. We made it a lot nicer for people. So if you're interested, go check it out.
Awesome. We will have links to that in our show notes, along with links to the stuff that we've talked about today. That's all over at thespawnchunks.com. The music for the show was composed by me, and The Spawn Chunks is proud to be a listener-supported podcast. If you're getting some value out of the show, why not consider putting some value back in? If you visit patreon.com/thespawnchunks, you can join our community. Pledging at any level gets you an invite to our patrons-only Discord chat. You can listen to the shows live when we record them in Discord every Monday. We have our monthly Minecraft audio hangouts where our listeners can let us know what they've been up to in Minecraft that month. And we're also going to keep the recording rolling, so we'll have a little post-show chat with Mog as well. We currently have 324 patrons, which is up 5 from last week, so thank you so much to everyone who's just jumped on board. There is always room for more. And special thanks go out to our content engineer patrons who help make this show happen. That's Hunter555, Jumbo Sale, Mindtrip Media, Party Voyager, and Yitz. Thank you all for your support on this episode.
Sharing the podcast with your friends is the easiest way to support the show. You can find us at The Spawn Chunks on social media. New episodes are available on Mondays on all the major podcasting platforms, including YouTube. You can email the show once again at spawnchunkmail@gmail.com. The RSS feed is linked on the spawnchunks.com, and the patron-only RSS feed is on the Patreon page. That's where you can get a listen to the Render Distance, the extended version of the podcast.
My name is Jonny, but online I go by Pixelriffs. You can find most of what I do at youtube.com/Pixelriffs, where the Minecraft Survival Guide is currently in its 3rd season, and I'm taking Mogswamp to an ancient city a little bit later this week. I also stream 3 days a week on Twitch, where I do behind-the-scenes work for my YouTube series, and I'm the voice of the unofficial Hermitcraft recap, which you can find through a quick YouTube search. Aside from that, I'm at Pixelriffs on both Twitter and Instagram. Joel, where can people find you online?
Everything that I'm doing online can be linked through joelduggan.com. That includes the Citadel Cafe, my podcast about sci-fi and fantasy entertainment. I'm Joel Duggan on social media and Joel Duggan on Twitch, where I stream Thursday through Sunday, trying to finishing up the West Hill build on the Citadel. And honestly, I've had some extra time, so you never know what day you might see me on Twitch, so come on by.
Thanks for visiting The Spawn Chunks. The world outside is infinite, and some even claim it's super flat.